Well, first and foremost, I would like to thank you for joining us for this special exhibit opening. So this evening you are in for a treat because we're not having just one exhibit opening, but two exhibit openings. The Maple Leaf, the American Civil War Shipwreck, and coming along we have a companion exhibit. It's an art exhibit featuring 13 local artists, each inspired by underwater archaeology and shipwrecks. Now let me share a little backstory. I'm French, so sometimes my word has a little backstory on how the maple leaf found its way to us. So when I was doing researches for the Sisters of Saint Joseph, which was a previous exhibit, he took me to the Mandarin, thank you, museum in Jacksonville. And as I was there, I discovered this beautiful room about the maple leaf. So I encourage you to go, it's very beautiful. And I found out that they don't have all the artifacts. Some of them are part of a traveling exhibit in Tallahassee, and it's part of the TREX program. So that's how it ended up here. Now, what is truly special about the maple leaf here, that we have a special edition that you're not going to find anywhere else a maple leaf will go, because I met the man who designed this exhibit. I'm talking about back to the 90s. This man is called John Locastro. He couldn't be here tonight, but he shared with us. He lives in Fiorentina. Forget this part. He's from here, and he's going to share with us for 3 months the early sketches for the exhibits, the design of it. Now, this exhibit will not be here without the generous support of 2 longtime members of the museum, so I think we can give them a warm round of applause. They financed the whole project, so thank you. I also
What's their names?
Yeah, that's anonymous.
Anonymous. I also want to thank all the volunteers and staff that helped moving and unloading the crates, and I'm talking about 2,000 pounds, and bringing upstairs. And a torpedo was in there. So thank you to all the volunteers that helped. I have one last thing to say, that if we are able to have the maple leaf exhibits today, it's thanks to one man, and you're going to meet with him in a few seconds. His name is Holland, and he was passionate about the story of the maple leaf, and he had the goal, it was to find it, and he did. He found his exact location in the St. John's River, and he founded the St. John's Archaeological Expedition to excavate the artifact. So he's going to tell all of his story, so please join me in giving a warm welcome to Holland.
Thank you very much, such a nice group. I used to do a lot of public speaking, but I haven't really given one in probably 2 decades. But when I heard that John Locastro was going to speak about the exhibit and called and found out about the TREX exhibit, because he and I were both responsible for building it. I mean, my company got state funding, and we allocated some of that state funding to produce a traveling exhibit. And this upstairs, it's the first time it's come to Jacksonville like this. And so I'm particularly proud in it, and it looks nice. I've seen it. I think you're going to enjoy it. And what I'm proposed to do tonight, since I'm not going to present a formal presentation, I'm going to show a 7.5-minute video that will really give you a good overall view of Maple Leaf and how significant she is and how important. Can you hear me back there?
Yes.
So I want to not only do that, but I then want to focus on telling you my story associated with Maple Leaf, because it went down for 100-something years, and then I ended up with it. You know, I tell people the last 5 letters of the word history spells story. And that's how I think we ought to teach history, is through stories, because statistical numbers, deaths, wounded, there's no soul in those things. But when you listen to the stories, and you're going to hear a lot of make-believe story, I hope you'll leave with some good content. And there's some history students here, and particularly one I told them I might even decide to come to your school and talk to you if it can inspire you. I hated history when I was growing up, but for some reason I fell in love with it, and I'm going to tell this one quick story. When I got out of dental school, it was 1975, and I had family friends that owned property on Cumberland Island. So I used to go up to Cumberland Island. Back then you could put a buck truck onto the ferry and take it across the island. And I was exploring the island, and all I heard was, oh, there's gold buried in the mountains. You can find Oglethorpe buried a lot of treasure up there. Well, I said, well, I'd like to find that. And so I went to Fernandina and St. Mary's and studied all the court documents that you had on records. And actually, I think it was in St. Mary's, it might have been here, I found a original document from Oglethorpe describing the fort on the northwestern part of the island, and had a drawing of it and how it looked, and I said, well, that's where we're going to go. So some buddies of mine and I got a little boat together, put it in right down here at the boat dock in Fernandina, went out, planned to beach the boat on a slack low tide so that when we got through getting all the gold off, the boat would be floating. And we got out there, and I had walkie-talkies and spotters at one end and spotters at another end, because you remember back then they were starting to talk about building the nuclear sub-base across from it, and they wanted to privatize Cumberland. I didn't want to go to jail or anything, so I was being very quiet about it. However, we did find some things. I found some china that was slow blue. I mean, it was period type. Bricks that were period type, and was excited about that. But the one thing I really found that really changed my whole direction was the no-see-ums. After being up there for about 3 hours waiting for the tide to come out, I said, you know what? If I find anything important in archaeology, it's going to have to be underwater. And that's a true story. So that was the end of my Cumberland research, and then after we go through this video, I'll tell you a little bit more about how complicated Maple Leaf is. At 4 o'clock in the morning, directly off the point of Mandarin, Maple Leaf struck an explosive instrument of war and sank onto the soft, muddy bottom of the St. Johns River.
Built in 1851 as an excursion boat, the 180-foot-long Maple Leaf could carry 500 tons of cargo. When the Civil War began, she was leased to the United States Army as a transport ship. In 1864, after the Union defeat at the North Florida Battle of Olustee, 3,000 troops were quickly brought from Folly Island, South Carolina, to Jacksonville to aid the retreating army. They left behind them not only their regimental equipment but their personal possessions, including items they had looted from Confederate homes in the area. All this was in the hold of the Maple Leaf as she steamed past Mandarin Point toward Jacksonville that fateful morning. 12 miles south of the city, the Maple Leaf hit an underwater mine planted by Confederates only hours before. She settled into the soft mud of the riverbed 24 feet below the surface.
It was athwart the stream, meaning pointing east-west. The river there runs north-south. The tidal currents wrenched the vessel, forcing it down into the mud. Now it was encased in a totally anaerobic environment, And that is why so much of the material is still preserved today.
After years of poring through records and archives, Keith Holland, a Jacksonville dentist and avid scuba diver, began searching part of the St. Johns River for the wreck of the Maple Leaf. In 1984, he located the remains of the hull, now buried 8 feet below the river's muddy bottom. After years of negotiations with state, national, and military agencies, Holland and his team began a series of excavations. They soon began to realize the importance and magnitude of the find.
The ship sank carrying the baggage and camp equipment of 3 regiments and a brigade headquarters. We recovered 1 ton of material, which was thousands and thousands of items.
But Army records indicate the ship was loaded with 400 tons of cargo, making the murky water south of Jacksonville home to what is easily the world's largest collection of Civil War cultural artifacts.
The cargo of the Maple Leaf, the baggage of an entire Union brigade, is a tremendous time capsule from the middle of the American Civil War. We have cannons from the Civil War, and swords from the Civil War, and even uniforms. But what does a Civil War toothbrush look like? What does a Civil War pocket comb look like? What did Civil War soldiers value enough to carry with them into the field? And what didn't they?
Every morning we have documentation where they would get up and go out to the shore of Folly Island and collect seashells and then place them in their trunks, hopefully to send them back home so they could decorate their mantle when they return. Musical instruments, drumsticks, flute, fifes, and in beautiful condition. One gentleman lost 3 swords. One was a ceremonial sword, which is a very big deal. All the members of his company pitch in and buy a commemorative ceremonial sword.
Some of the most beautiful finds are household items, most likely collected by the soldiers on forays into the Confederate-held countryside around Charleston, South Carolina.
We know for a fact that they spent some time traveling south of Folly Island and raiding several plantations in that area. We found doorknobs, hinges to doors, window panes. One item that I would love to live long enough to see, it would be a pigeonhole desk, which is where the 13th Indiana and the New York Regiment placed all of their written documents and letters that were important about the war. All that material was lost in the hull of the Maple Leaf, and we already know for a fact that even paper can survive.
But Holland and his team did recover a host of other beautifully preserved military artifacts.
That catch is absolutely priceless to understanding what the experience of being a soldier in the Union Army from 1861 to 1865 was like.
Each soldier kept his personal possessions in a wooden box with his name painted on the lid. The boxes recovered from the Maple Leaf are filled with both everyday items and small treasures.
It's very easy to forget that the Civil War was about people, caught up in what was, for most of them, the greatest experience of their life. For thousands of them, the last experience of their life. Most of the people involved in the Civil War have never had a voice. They didn't keep journals, they didn't write letters, or they haven't survived. That material from the Maple Leaf gives us a window onto their lives, what they valued, what they believed in.
But with such a wealth of cultural treasure on board, it's hard to understand why the world so quickly forgot about the Maple Leaf after she sank, leaving her cargo completely undisturbed for the next 125 years.
It was just one of those tragic things that occurred during the war, but it was not the Monitor, it was not a USS naval ship, it was a transport, and there was very little recorded about it.
The Maple Leaf shipwreck was declared a National Historic Landmark in 1994. No other excavation has been done since then. But Keith Holland still marvels at the sheer magnitude of his discovery.
And how are you ever going to remove 800,000 pounds of cultural material and conserve it? It's not practical. It has to be done in cycles. The next generation will have to excavate the next time. There are today 399 tons of the baggage and camp equipment of thousands and thousands of human beings who fought in the American Civil War and lived in the South, buried in the St. Johns River just 30 miles from here by the crow flies, in a state of perfect preservation. And they will likely forever remain there unless somebody else decides to go back and excavate more material. I mean, it is so significant that we knew we had to stop. We were not going to, there's just no way you can remove that much material and conserve it and get it on display. But I am confident as I stand here today, 25 years later, that it's okay. It's still there, perfectly preserved. What's 100 years? What's 200 years buried in that river? Have y'all ever stuck your foot in the bottom of the St. Johns River? It's nasty. Nasty. But that I learned to love that because no oxygen means no decomposition. I'll tell you another funny story. Just 5 or 6 years ago, I was helping my son work on his dock, and I had to go get a special wrench to fit this particular nut. And it was $34, $35, got it all on his own, you know, and I'm working, cranking, and I go to take the crank off, and they all three separate, and brand new $35 wrench drops down in the river. And we're hanging on this thing, and I said, now who's going to go down there and get that? And my son looked at me and said, Daddy, I don't know but one man. Well, I did get it. Now, I want to take an opportunity to get you all to know me and hear my story. If you have any questions, I can tell you it doesn't matter what phase it is. The problem with giving speeches about Maple Leaf, you can't make them too organized because it is so convoluted, so complicated. It involved math, it involved science, it involved conservation, it involved recovery, it involved diving, decompression schedules, diver concession, zero visibility, no, you can't see a thing. You could take lights down there and put that light right on your helmet and not see anything. It was a massive undertaking, and then once that stuff came out, they had to be treated with electrolysis, with freeze dryers, with polyethylene glycol, chemicals taken care of. And then once it was restored, we had to, it wouldn't do any good just to have them restored and sitting around, so we had to make exhibits and build exhibits. There's the Mansion Museum is a premier exhibit, but one of the first exhibits we built is upstairs that we're going to go see in a minute. And I'm going to go with you, and we can talk about the artifacts and what's up there. But that TREX exhibit, John LeCantro designed it, and we assisted him and had the artifacts, and we gave it to the state of Florida. And it has been hundreds of thousands of people have seen it. It's traveled out of state, it's traveled to Wisconsin. He's going to give you a report on where all it's gone, but it's been a blessing. Yes, ma'am.
Could you give us some more details about how you found the ship? And
Yes.
how did you excavate the mud?
Well, I'm going to how did I find it and how did we excavate it? The first thing I did was I hired a researcher in the National Archives. I was looking for it, okay, but I didn't really know where it was. And she would send me a bill for $300, say, didn't find anything. And she'd send me a bill for $300, say she didn't find anything. Well, that went on for 2 or 3 months, and I was thinking, you know, but finally, she did find a file that was in the judicial branch of the National Archives, not the Department of Army or the quartermasters. And it appears that the Maple Leaf was, the owners sued the United States of America for the value of the ship once it blew up. Now, that tipped me off. You know, now I had contracts with the Corps and things like that that I could talk, you know, look into. So then I took an infrared photograph, and I ordered one from the the Navy, or it was old infrared photograph from 20,000 feet of the Mandarin area. And then I had an 1883 river chart showing an obstruction where the Maple Leaf should be. Then I made a photographic slide of each about in the same area. I took 2 projectors, y'all know what I mean by projectors, slide projectors, and I put them on a screen and adjusted the image, and so I got them as close to where they fit each other. And then I was able to go up to the 1884 chart that showed an obstruction. It didn't say Maple Leaf, it just showed an obstruction.
So there was something sticking up out of the mud?
No, well, it was a navigational chart, and I wanted to alert the people that if you're running a steamship up here, there's a little area over here that you might run into something. And then I was able to take the 1984 infrared photograph, and I could draw a line from that mark to Club Continental, to that mark to Buckman Bridge, to that mark to you know, an area. And so what I started realizing was that I was getting angles, and that I should be able to figure out distances. And then I remembered that this must be trigonometry. I can remember in 11th grade or 9th grade or 10th grade saying, this is a waste of my time. But fortunately, my sister majored in math, and she was able to give me a much faster crash course in trigonometry. And then I learned to take a sextant and turn it sideways, and I could get those angles, and the next thing you know, I was sitting right on top of it, and then found it. Of course, I put scuba gear on, go down there, and now I'm not talking about it to everybody, because I'm thinking this is going to be a big deal. I'm going to make a killing on it. And what I realized was the deck of the ship, if this is the deck that we're walking on, the deck of the ship is buried now 5.5 feet below the mud line. 5.5 feet. So when you get out of my boat and you drop down in the water, you go 20 feet down till you feel the mud line. Mud line. Then you have to go suck down another 5.5 feet to the deck.
Well, you were using
all by feel. There's no light. You can't.
You weren't using like those vacuum things that they suck.
Yeah, we were sucking the mud, but I think your camera came out of that. I mean, we would control what was going in there. What we wanted to do is get down to the deck, cargo deck, which we did, and then we cut a hole in that cargo deck that was 4 feet by 8 feet, and then we went another 10 feet down to the bilge ceiling. And within that 10-foot column, hence all of the artifacts that we own, possess today at the Mandarin Museum in Tallahassee and Department of Center of Military History, and up here in the traveling system, all came out of that area. And that was 0.1% of the estimated cargo of the entire ship. Then we sealed it all up. And we went down.
Well, how did you keep the mud when you went down?
Well, she wants to know how did we keep the mud from collapsing back into it.
Yeah.
We built fences around each area that we worked, and that was primarily because if we didn't have a fence there and we go take, you know, we had to sleep, we'd go sleep, then we'd go back down. Well, this hole that we've now dug that might be 4 feet is full of plastic bottles and beer cans and cola cans and trash and bags of trash. So we had to start fencing everything off, and that kind of helped prevent the mud from filling back in. But I will tell you, at the end of every year when we stopped diving, within 3 months, that bottom surface would just go like jello, you know, we just close up. So every year we went back, we had to start all over again and then work down to the depth. Now, so we removed a ton out of 400 tons. That leaves 800 something thousand pounds of baggage and camp.
How big was your boat that you were using?
What?
How big was your boat that you were using to haul this
Well,
stuff?
when we started out, it was just a pontoon boat. But later, we had people donating, you know, big boats. I mean, 30-footers where we could sleep on them, you know, and then more out there. But we also had my primary go-to boat was a 23-foot wellcraft. Then we built a barge to carry pump equipment, and I mean, we just built a fleet. And then at the end of the diving season, all that stuff had to go be put up and set up. And then
You mean in the winter?
yes, during winter time. And then we brought it all back out and went back out to work. And we did that for a decade. I mean, 10 years.
How many people were working with you?
There were probably about 10 principal SAGIs. And when I say SAGI, that's a short acronym for St. John's Archaeological Expeditions Incorporated. So the SAGIs, there were about 10, and they were pretty dedicated, and they would show up. But they never got paid a dime.
But they were volunteers.
Yeah, they were all volunteers. And not only that, not only one of them was a certified commercial diver. All the rest of them had to become certified commercial divers. And they did, because they were just so committed. But I mean, you would have done it too. I guarantee you, if you had called me and said, I want to go dive on the Maple Leaf, I said, all right, come on, we can do it. Because we had the knowledge, we had standby divers, we had some. If I had to go down on the deck and go inside the hold and excavate something, I'm attached to an umbilical, I have a helmet on, I can communicate by voice to the ship up the top. He can communicate to me, the diving station operator. He's watching all the airflow to me and what's going on. I'm talking to him. The line tenders who are standing there holding that umbilical are handling the hose. They'll give me some if I want it, take some back if I want it. They know where I am. I mean, we never had one single diving accident while we were out there. And of the 20 people we had, 90% of them acquired over 300 hours underwater.
So when you first found the boat, there were no buildings nearby that you could use?
Yes, there was. Club Continental was one.
But you seemed to have to, there was a distance, it wasn't that close.
Well, you mean it was still hard
You
to
would
find?
like to find it.
What we didn't have was GPS. In fact, we had GPS, but it was boogered up GPS. They used to put random errors in it. So that just wasn't good enough. I mean, now, since Clinton, I think, got rid of it, now you can just go right out there and drop a line. But we didn't have that flexibility. And the other thing is, we had to build structure. I mean, this ship's 180-something feet long and buried under 5.5 feet of mud. Well, the first thing we had to do was run a steel cable from the rudder post, back of the boat, all the way up to the bow of the boat, 180. I'm talking about a steel cable with little things on it every 5 feet, you know, so that if I wanted to go to the back of the boat, I could grab hold of that, and all I have to do is follow it, and I'll go to the rudder post. If you don't do that, chances are you're going to end up with Club Continental or Mandarin.
When you first found it, there was nothing sticking up out of the mud.
Yes, there was. The only thing that was sticking out of the mud was part of the vertical walking beam, which is that part that would turn the paddle wheel, it would move up and down like this. Everything else was under mud. And in fact, it's funny, did you have a question?
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
I didn't want to interrupt you.
No, I'm done.
What was your personal favorite item that was recovered and why?
Well, that's funny, you know. I almost hate to tell you. It was seashells. These poor damn gum Yankees living on Folly Island, which I used to surf on Folly Island when I was a teenager. And they hated it, you know. The mosquitoes were killing them, and but in every box or every other box, there were beautiful seashells in there that they wanted to take home, hopefully take home, and share with their family members on their fireplace mantle. You know, it's like this video said, you know, for thousands and thousands of these people, it was the greatest adventure of their life. And for even more, it was the end of their life. I mean, I don't know if y'all realize, but we are still affected by the repercussions from the American Civil War. You get in your car and drive to Virginia. When you cross that Georgia line and get into South Carolina, you're going to be bumper to bumper traffic all the way to Virginia, and that's because South Carolina will never forgive the North for Sherman coming in there and destroying all of their food. I mean, I just believe that. They are just trying to make us miserable. I'm not going to fix this, you know. I mean, I'll just take this everybody and drag my feet out. So I've been going back and forth. I started in dental school in 1970. No, I went to Brevard, North Carolina, and back in 1968. So they've been working on that damn thing since 1968, and they still can't get it together. Yeah.
I was wondering, since you have names on these boxes, or some of them that you found, have there been any like genealogists or
Yes,
people
yeah,
finding
there have been
families?
ancestors
Yeah.
who say, I like that. But you can take pictures of it, you can look at it.
But I mean, like if they had descendants that are alive today.
Yes,
they
yes,
know,
there
so
are
they-
descendants
so they
that
know
are
about
alive
it.
today.
Oh, that's cool.
And they have. I can call some off the right in hand, but I mean, it's not as important to me as those that we don't know about. I mean, seriously, you know why these northern troops came down here was because the Battle of Olustee was so terrible. Now, and I'll say that, but here's another thing. I want you to leave with this thought too. So Maple Leaf sank because she struck a torpedo, which was a mine that was floating in the water with 50 pounds of triple F black powder in it, and a exothermic chemical detonator, and it was dropping, boom. Well, there is enough evidence, in my opinion, and this would be the only reason I'd want to go back and dive on the Maple Leaf again, is, and I didn't do this, and it's my fault, but if I ever get a chance, what I want to do is go back and go down the port side of the ship, which was supposed to have struck the torpedo, and determine whether the ship planks are blown in or out. Because I can produce some pretty substantial evidence supporting a conspiracy theory that the owners blew it up on purpose. And the guy who was making the mines, Mr. Byron, lived in Orange Park, and it would have been very easy for them to set them out. I'm not saying they didn't set 12 torpedoes out there, but I am saying that in Charleston, South Carolina, where they were making these mines, it would have been easy for somebody to put a 50-pound keg of triple F black powder in the hold of the bow of the Maple Leaf to blow it up. Now, what would be the motive to do that? Maple Leaf was a Canadian registered vessel. She wasn't a United States vessel. That violates, you know, admiralty law. She, the owners were overcharging the Department of Army for transport. They were getting paid an astronomical amount of money. She was reportedly capable of carrying 500 tons of cargo. Maybe, maybe not. You know, in some cases, you're not supposed to count. All you're supposed to count is the deck. Anything above the deck, you can't count. And if they counted more than that, then the quartermasters had her at 500 tons. When she was placed in the water in 1851 in Canada, she was recorded as 200 and something tons. Now there is a difference between tonnage in Canada and American, but it ain't 300 tons. So, I don't know. It would have been so easy to do that. And if anybody ever gets ready to go down there, that's the first thing I'm going to say, go down there. And if those planks and that deck, which they'll be right where they were, if they're blown out like this, everything's different. Everything's wrong. And they actually ended up suing the government and taking them to the Supreme Court, or trying to, for more money. And the government said, you made 3 times what you bought the ship for, and we ain't paying you a dime more. And there's the end of it. Yes?
Do you think it's sunk further into the mud since you last
No. No, there is, that muck is so fine. There is a point where the engine and the heavy metal and all that, it's going to reach equilibrium. I mean, it won't float in water, but it will float in that muck. And it's also possible that the actual bottom of the boat is really sitting on the limestone foundation. When we got down, so let's say that's the deck up top, okay, and we cut a hole in it. And it's 10 feet, this may be 10 feet from there down, maybe a little lower. But it's 10 feet from the deck that you'd be walking on down to the bilge ceiling. And so this would be all the cargo space right here. When we got down to the bilge ceiling, I could feel cold water blowing through the bilge. I mean cold spring water, which meant we had to remove so much silt and cargo that we started a flowing spring. Now, when we quit, I'm confident that it just goes, that mud just goes, this slump stuff and flows it. But that's a good point. I mean, but who's going to go back? You know, I don't know. It's going to take. Where's Scott? Scott's going to go back. Maybe. It's going to take somebody young to do it. And believe me, if I'd have known what I was going to get into, this is for Scott. This is for LeCastro.
Oh, okay.
Is he here, John?
No, he's not.
Okay. Scott is in high school here. What's the name of the school?
Yulee High School.
And he's here from the history club. I don't think history is his favorite subject, is it? But I never thought much of history, you know, when I was in school. But I'll tell you what, by golly, you know, once I got out, I've read Bernard Diaz, Conquest of Mexico 3 times. I mean, who does that? You know, the Lewis and Clark expedition 2 times. I mean, once you start reading and you've got time to do it and enjoy it, I mean, you can go anywhere and do anything. And Maple Leaf, and I like the fact that she's still there, that it's not over. It's just beginning. Now, why don't we go upstairs and take a look at the exhibit? Can we do that?
No more questions?
Anybody else have any questions? I'm going to go up here with you.